This video demonstrates the step-by-step process I took when creating my magazine front cover. Here is the original image I took from the photo shoot. This version has not yet been edited or changed in any way. I then used Adobe Photoshop CS6 to change the contrast, exposure and brightness of the image. Once I was happy with the edited photo, I used a series of brushes to create the cracks and damage on her forehead. I then moved on to using a variety of smoke brushes to create the mist and smoke to frame her face. I blurred, warped, distorted and blended the smoke into the hair, resizing and moving the brush layers as I went along. The next step was creating the title. I used a logo to create a template which I then placed over the top of the main image and then removed the word total to make sure the background could be seen through the title. I did this to make sure I was using the conventions of total film covers. Once this was sized correctly and in the place I wanted it, I moved on to the cover lines. I made sure to use only the left third of the cover to keep to traditional magazine formatting and so that my image wasn't bombarded with text. I used various film sites and blogs to find out which films were being released at the same time as my chosen release date to add authenticity to the cover. Once I had selected the 3 films I thought were most appropriate to my magazine brand, I created taglines to go underneath them. To make sure I was staying true to existing Total Film issues, I used the same font type and sized it appropriately to my own. I used white as my colour scheme like most of the issues I had taken inspiration from, and made sure the film titles were in bold so they stood out against the cover lines. I tried to stay as close to conventional formatting for both regular film press and in particular Total Film, as I felt it was important to stick to my brand to show my understanding. I think I achieved this by keeping a systematic and neat formality to my work, but varying the boldness, capitalising and underlining certain words that helped make the uniform of my cover look professional. I wanted to include the infamous puff used on every issue I'd seen of Total Film, which is their USP for each issue. I blurred it slightly to develop the conventions and keep in with the smoky effect of my main image. Originally, I chose to have this above the cover lines on the left, however I felt that the right side of my cover was too bare, so I felt that just overlapping the M of the title was the most appropriate place. The next design feature I added was the banner at the bottom of the page. I wanted to keep with the white, red, black and grey theme of my cover. To balance out the heavy use of red at the top of my cover, I felt that this was the most appropriate colour to use. I made sure the swatch was the same red throughout my work by matching the colours for both the title and banner. I originally wanted a tab in the top right corner of the magazine, which is conventional to most Total Film covers. However, this made the corner look too cluttered and none of the colours from my chosen colour scheme looked right, as well as leaving the bottom of the page too empty, as I didn't feel the one giant cover line about my film worked particularly well. I then looked for some interesting film articles and gossip, and I felt that Christopher Nolan and the biggest stars of this year were the most relatable for the magazine, as I had seen similar cover lines and puffs on other issues. I used white and grey to match my colour scheme, making sure the grey matched the smoke used on top of my background to keep a unified look to my cover. I kept the same font that Total Film uses to make sure I was working close to the brand identity as possible. Next came my cover line. This had to be the biggest text on my cover to make sure readers would associate the main image with my film. I used the same font and colours again to keep the presentation neat, but just increased the size of the text and made sure it fitted nicely on my quilted banner. The issue number and date on every Total Film magazine has a different font to the cover line, but is positioned in the space of the M. I wanted to replicate this using the same font as the magazine, the white colour that is used commonly on Total Film covers, and to keep with my colour scheme. I sized and proportioned this according to how the professional covers do before moving on to creating more text above the masthead. Total Film uses a banner of lines of text at the top of the magazine to advertise a special edition issue, or what the main selling points of the brand is. I was going to do a horror themed issue, but I felt that this would move too far away from what Total Film is known for, so I looked at back issues of the magazine and picked the ones I saw most often on their issues. I used the same grey as I had in the banner at the bottom to keep my colour scheme and to make sure my cover wasn't overloaded with white, which would detract from the spooky element to my main image. I felt grey worked nicely with the smoke. Finally was the barcode, which I was going to have twisted vertically like some of the issues I saw. However, I didn't like this when creating my own, so instead I decided to go with what I felt looked neatest above the banner. I knew I wanted to keep it on the right to balance out the puff underneath the masthead, and that is how I created my magazine front cover.